Welcome everybody today to the Silver Psyop. We have a returning guest from about 8 months ago. She is a fantastic human being as well as a tireless researcher of all things ancient and recent history as well for humanity. Her name is Sylvie Iwanova. She is a personification of the divine feminine spirit, and I am absolutely honored to have you here again, Sylvie. Welcome back.
Hello, and thank you for having me on again.
Well, it's been a few months since we spoke, and lots is always happening in this type of field. I just wanted to kind of allude back to our last interview where we kind of got to know you a little bit, and you had explained a lot of basically your motivations and some of the experiences that you had as a young girl to get you to kind of where we are today. And the outpouring of comments and love that I have has just been astonishing because I know you don't allow comments on your YouTube channel, so it's like people have used it as an outlet kind of to say what they wanted to that aren't following you in other areas. And, they just, everybody is so thankful to have someone like you out there. And I just wanted to convey that, the love and thanks that people are sending your way through my channel here.
Well, thank you in return.
So basically, I guess the first thing I want to ask you, kind of, people wanted to know what country is your birth? Where were you born?
I was born in Bulgaria and I lived there till the age of 17.
Right on. So, and
And
you're still in
ever,
Europe.
pardon?
And you're still in Europe?
At the moment, yes, but ever since I left at that time, it has been always a constant travel all over the world for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, you are very busy, aren't you? There are there are things to see on every continent, basically. So I guess you got a lot of work ahead of you still. How have you been noticing or experienced a lot of interest in your expedition coming up in March? Because that sounds like an amazing trip to be a part of.
The Bulgarian expedition is fully booked already,
Nice.
and the expedition to Turkey is not yet.
God, that sounds so fascinating. I actually have a week of holidays in there that doesn't quite line up. I don't have enough time. Otherwise, I was going to try and get over there to experience that because Turkey is probably number a tie with number one with Peru for me as far as places that I need to go to see. Um, so, are you going to be documenting that entire trip as well and making some videos about it?
Yes, most definitely. And this time I'm already much better prepared. I bought a couple of cameras because previously I did very poorly on the photographing side of the full thing, which is a shame. Especially, I have to do the Italy expedition again because I could not take proper footage and show the people what I actually saw. And in addition to that, as we speak now, half an hour ago, I got my drone delivery, and I'm gonna try to fly it later on today, hopefully. And yes, I hope I can take even drone footage this time because previously, since I'm somewhat negative towards all technology, I it was kind of foolish and immature. I didn't go to expeditions with proper equipment, but now I realize this mistake. We should not demonize all technology. Technology as such is neutral. It's not bad. It's another question that it is mostly used for enslavement nowadays, but this should not, uh, you know, uh, prevent me from using it the right way. So this
Yeah.
time I hope to correct the mistakes from the previous expeditions, and I'm going very well technically equipped.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds astonishing because, and actually, it's a testament to your person as well. Because just being able to admit at any time along your journey that maybe one way of thinking wasn't quite as beneficial to your research as it could have been, that's really good. I'm glad that you pointed that out because yeah, it's technology is definitely how we use it, not necessarily what it was intended to be used for. um, that sounds so exciting. I'm really excited to hear more about that stuff. Um, One thing that I really like to focus on, or one of the most enjoyable part of your research, is the timeline, the errors in timeline. I was just wondering if if you'd be willing to go into some of the reasons and some of the evidence that you've been able to come across that suggests that whether it's the church or scholars or whoever it is that's intentionally manipulating dates on what we told her as ancient documents and stuff like that.
There is overwhelming evidence, like it's hard to now present it all, especially in format for an audio broadcast. But the research of Anatoly Fomenko, and he's definitely showing that confusion with the years when the letter J is interpreted as number one, although they are not the same. Yeah, so he shows with many examples, and I have seen such examples myself after he made me aware through his books. So this is one very direct evidence. At places we see it's clearly written year J 675, but we are told this is year 1675, while it's written completely different thing. And also he shows how when they remodel old churches and things like this, many such scenarios, they simply forge the dates. They change them. Before it was J, they just replace it with 1, as if it was originally with 1. So this is one of the reasons. And other forgeries in terms of dates, also on photographs, on documents. People are finding them also independently. Many people have joined his project called the New Chronology Project, just because before that they independently discovered such discrepancies with the years, and then they found, oh, so I'm not the first one, and then they made this group of, it's an international group of people from everywhere, from Germany, from Bulgaria, of course from Russia. They participate in this project of the New Chronology, and they have dug out a large amount of evidence of number of shifts in dates, and that's in terms of what was in the last couple of 1,000 or 2,000 years, sorry, not couple. And before that it's a complete porridge, mishmash. Like yesterday I found out a new piece of information about this pyramid in Chui. I'm having problems with the name. Remarks which were taken by the original archaeologist who was digging out the place. So it was buried even on the pavement around the pyramid, and parts of the pyramid were clearly buried under numerous layers of lava. And this lava and ash, they also had artifacts of various cultures in them, so there is no mistake. So according to mainstream dating, all these lava layers, they are 7,000, 10,000 or much, much older. Yeah?
Yeah.
He found, and but the pyramid itself is dated like 1,000 or 2,000 years old. And it's a total mishmash. So he was forced by the circumstances. Yeah, that was decades ago, not very recently. He was forced only to mention the layers which are up to 7,000 years old, and how much really older he found, God knows. But even that is quite a lot. And on the top of that, the pyramid itself looks quite newish. I for some time, at some point in my time, I had to restore all houses, organize people to do it. So I have some eye for this, how houses decay, because I was restoring a couple of historic houses, a couple of 100 years old. I knew their date of construction and all that. So I know how fast construction falls apart. There is no way that that pyramid is 7 or 10 or 20,000 years old. I'm sorry, unless it was preserved in a jelly. This doesn't seem to be the case. So it's a really total mishmash.
That's interesting.
I was thinking, do we even know that this is lava for sure? It could be like recently it was a major milestone in my exploration to find out that stone can be grown. So maybe it's not lava at all. Also, I found another interesting idea that sometimes the earth is archived, not historic sites can be archived by the superintendents of the earthly civilizations. Because now we are like the small stupid people, so important stuff is sometimes just covered by them, so that we can't get to the places of power and create havoc with our negative thought forms. So who knows? Well, I wouldn't think it's exactly this example is like intentionally covered because it's not fully covered. But anyhow, I'm just saying we don't know even if the lava is lava, what to speak of any dating. I think it's even useless to try to adjust, is the pyramid older or are the layers younger? It's just the full thing is a joke.
Yeah, I completely agree, and you find that unfortunately in almost every site that I'm sure you go to, as far as what's being written down. Everybody who comes along doesn't seem to acknowledge the researcher before them or the local, the local actual stories and whatnot, as far as who and what was going on then. Um, so I guess basically that type of stuff was probably fairly easy, I'm assuming, for them to pull over. Would you think that it was because the literacy rate and that type of thing, like not as many people were able to read anything, even when those documents were written, and it was never been in the hands of the regular people? Is that kind of where you think that took hold?
You mean the records of the actual excavations?
Well, just any kind of records at all that have been changed as far as dating.
We don't even know how was the literacy at that time. We don't even know that. What were the factors? We even don't know because we don't know anything. Recently, I'm just getting the impression that I've been too much naive to believe the mainstream history. It's wrong even more than I suggested a couple of months ago. This is what I'm realizing lately.
Really? That's pretty scary because, I mean, your opinion a couple months ago was not all that high of this system. Can you just go into that a little bit? What things that you may have discovered recently that have really shaken your belief?
Well, things like this, like this case that I told you, which is not even a question of interpretation. It's like a question of how all their stories match. What is very shaky? What made it shaky? Well, for example, major thing that made it shaky was when I was making the video about growing stones. I discovered that the situation with geology is no different than that of the historic science or so-called science. And it's same like with the Darwin theory, which now we call theory as if it is something proven, but in reality it's just a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that I read the material of a mainstream professor, very prominent one, who frankly admitted that all these ideas of origins of rock, they are not anything proven. They are preached as if it is as if they are proven, but in reality, in the beginning, they were introduced as a hypothesis. And exactly at the time when Darwin's theory, although being hypothesis, was labeled as theory, which is wrong, it should not be.
Yeah.
At that time, they also made the same with geology. And then I also realized at that time they introduced medical so-called science, which aims at poisoning people. So it's kind of scary when I saw to what an extent just let's say roughly 200 years ago or something they like established a paradigm and made it kind of official without any good intent. Or and yeah, you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And why I actually didn't reply, why did they do the changing of the years? It's very important that people think, for them it is very important to deceive people that the times when they had more personal freedom, those times were far, far away. And also they deceive us that people were primitive at that time. So I think the main reason for everything is to convince us that advancement and of civilization has to go hand in hand with losing our liberties. In reality, we were quite free even a couple of 100 years ago. And I recently I found a very good formulation of the full situation. Like one example, the Stone Age, it's a very good name because it describes the time when people could fashion anything out of even huge stones without any problem. Yeah, we see smooth cuttings, absolutely giant proportions of blocks being used. Didn't seem to have been difficult for them as it would be difficult for us.
Yeah.
But now we kept the name Stone Age, but now for the people it means that people were banging each other with stones. They were so stupid that we couldn't do anything else but bang stones or throw it at each other. So it's like this, something remains the same, but it's so twisted that it becomes the opposite. It was a very personal experience which took place almost a year ago or a bit less. So what happened, I have a lot of roses, so I was cutting roses, a row of roses, and I was throwing the cuttings in a bucket. So as I cut the next branch, somehow I noticed that the bucket is no longer where it used to be. I was cutting and throwing them there, and the bucket was missing. And in the beginning, I convinced myself, well, I must have something mistake happened, and I started looking for it, and it was nowhere to be found in the entire garden.
What?
And even with the cuttings, also I started, come on, I was concentrated, I wasn't spaced out. Then I thought, well, okay, I don't know, maybe the bucket, I'm confused, but where are all the cuttings? Maybe if I got confused. Everything it just disappeared in my hands. Literally.
Oh my God.
And, well, and it was such a situation, like a clean, big lawn. It's not that it can get lost amongst 1,000 other things. Okay, so if this wasn't enough, after a few days, I just went there and I found the bucket. It was right there in the middle of the lawn next to the roses, together with all the cuttings, exactly where it disappeared.
Oh my God.
No, and actually, and now I realize that this might have happened even previously to me and many other people. At least I know one other case when it happened for sure. But we just probably convince ourselves that we have forgotten or we got confused.
Yeah, definitely.
And but in this case, it was such a situation, such circumstances that it was obvious that it disappeared. And this made me think really, really very deep about these timelines and parallel realities, which I believed in general before that, but I never gave them any importance because they were purely theoretical to me. But after this incident, I'm not saying that's the only explanation, but I think I have to consider them more and more seriously. And then we are now, in terms of history, it's becoming really very complex when we add these, ideas of splitting of timelines and sometimes even merging. We have some sources, okay, but so this, and then my overall impression, and I've been praying to understand all this, is that maybe actually the way we try to understand history in this linear way of the way we understand time is just like flattening a three-dimensional object
Yeah.
for the purpose of simplifying it and teaching it to simple creatures. So maybe to really understand the history, we need to go into 3D.
I totally concur. It's that's probably why we can't. No one can explain what it is, right? Because we aren't thinking of it in a way that it can be explained in.
Yeah, I mean, even in this flattened model, still we can achieve something. We haven't explored the flattened model to its end. I'm not saying that all the deliberate fraud should be because of the model we use. No, that is not an excuse to deceive people with history. But if we really want to understand everything, I think we'll have to delve into other dimensions and how different timelines can affect. Also, because and then I actually now I start now I after this incident with the missing roses. I also start connecting some visions, astral visions, which I had years ago and I did not understand. And in these visions, our situation currently is heavily influenced by other timelines of, like, for example, the timeline which is mostly influencing us, what I saw in the visions, is a split in timelines which occurred towards the end of the Second World War. Yes, the way it ended in our timeline, it ended differently over there.
Oh my God. So, okay, continue. Sorry.
And well, but that's what I saw years ago, and I dismissed it because I wasn't. I was doing other things at that time. Those visions were completely different. Not was just they were like for me at that time kind of irrelevant. I didn't know what to make out of them. I just remember them, and then, by the way, after that I read an article by Project Camelot. Yeah, there is this lady, Carrie Cassidy, and she was interviewing somebody. And that person, he was telling, I hope he is genuine, but he was telling a story which was in full consistency with what I saw. I'm not saying that I trust all the people she interviews. I'm not even watching that channel anymore because she's lovely, but some of the people she interviews are just, I think they're paid agents.
Oh yeah, it's
Paid by the dark side to disinform us.
there's a lot of that going on in some of the more liberal type of channels that will actually consider some of this stuff, because yeah, they know. I believe they know that the people who think along those paths are the ones that are going to expose them in the end, right? So they need to direct it. I think.
Yeah.
But good for you for picking up on that, because yeah, I've totally noticed that type of thing, and a few others like Gaia and other ones I believe as well could be directed down some incorrect paths. Um, Disinformation is probably the biggest hurdle that we face. Trying to expose these things and present, at least an honest perspective of what is occurring or could have been occurring. Um, Thank you so much for that explanation. I mean, I wanted to actually, what you were talking about there. When you were young, was it, you were, um, I remember you telling us about visions, that always singing hymns and having these
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
visions. Was this something similar to that type of experience?
At that time, I didn't see visual images,
Oh, okay.
but at that time, I just knew things. Visual images I've had very limited outside of shamanic rituals. After then with ayahuasca, of course, I had really a lot of them. And after that, after ayahuasca, I sometimes get lucid visions, especially at the points when I am between the sleep and the awake condition, or coming or going into sleep.
Hmm.
At that time, it's the easiest to get some astral visions, and that happens to me sometimes, especially after ayahuasca.
So are you actually more conscious of it now?
Yes, yes, the ayahuasca opened the gate, and now I'm even when I don't do it as before, still the gate is a bit open.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I've just been doing a lot more research into that type of stuff, and before I plunge myself and let my mind and body into that world. Um, Obviously, it's important to know as much as we can know, and I really appreciate you sharing those experiences. Um, Recently, I've been. Uh, have you heard of Mario Biglio? He was a translator for the Vatican Publishing Company, and he has been going into basically what the actual Hebrew words mean and how they've been sorely mistranslated. And he's actually the second person from the Vatican that I've seen releasing these types of information. And the fact that they're being allowed to do it obviously means that something's about to happen or change. But they basically just go on to say, like, that the Elohim was not actually a word for a god. It doesn't have an English translation. And then also that Yahweh was actually just a being of the Elohim, one of the members, which were giants and all that. So, I mean, I'm starting to see a lot of these different research backgrounds starting to, say the same type of stuff. I mean, I remember one of your ayahuasca experiences that you told us. It was, you kept asking the question, who did this? Why did they do this? Who was it? And then you said that you looked down and you had a massive body covered in hair, and were like
Yeah,
making
yeah, yeah.
strides across the plains of the earth.
That was with the builders of the rock cut ruins.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So, and I mean, that also fits in with basically what the local um, histories are, the traditions and the stories that we find carved in these rocks. And I think that's so exciting to finally see, like, people with other different types of, credentials finding this stuff out. And these people aren't researchers, they just are translators. And, they end up in a bit of a storm because of what they read and what they translated. Um, So I was just hoping that you could maybe elaborate a bit more on these the growing rocks that you'd kind of talked about there.
Yeah, the growing rocks. This is what really is on my mind lately, and that's gonna be the subject of the expeditions. Just to continue this, the line of story of this vision. In the summer, I was lucky to meet Eusebio again. That was the healer whom I met in the Philippines. And I was trying to use him as a channel because I respect him so much as a healer, as a person who really has connection with spirits. And one of the questions I asked him was who built the rock-cut cities. And the only interesting piece of information was that they were crude and hairy people. So this, with being crude and hairy, it's kind of confirmed. And he described them pretty much as primitive looking. And so at that time, I still didn't understand, but how did they make the rocket cities? Because they also have some traces of quite an advanced engineering techniques, and at places even the surface is smooth and not clear how they made it. Didn't look like chiseled, so it didn't answer my questions at that time. But then when I found this about the rock growing stuff on one online blog, this was like finally the breakthrough for me. And yeah, like when I was browsing the images of the sites in Bulgaria that we are gonna visit, I was very surprised to discover that some of the surfaces there really don't, they look like this molten stone technology.
Is that like
Sorry, technique.
the Trovent stones in Romania as well?
No, that is growing. That is obviously growing. I mean, they are growing even officially.
Okay. So is this one on your site? Because I actually have your site up right now, so I can pull that stuff up as you speak about it if you want.
No, the entire story of how to grow stones is in one video. That's not on the website.
What about the Bulgarian, the one that you're planning on going to?
In about Bulgaria, this is all I know for now.
Okay.
But there are sites, at least 3 of them I found, one I found later on, and the stone really looks molten. It doesn't look cut. And now, what to get back to the original regression session, which revealed all this stone cutting, and it's confirmed by the images. No matter what the source is, even if some blogger made up that story, it doesn't matter, because with the images and the observations, I think it's well proven, this about growing stones. So on that regression session, he said that the people who built the rocket cities, they were simple people, but they just learned how to live together with the stones and how to kind of communicate with them. That was he didn't describe the specific how did they really operate the stone building, these primitive people. Was it with their intention, or did they know some recipe? Because now we have recipes, with growing bacteria and this type of stuff. It's not that easy. If some advanced race has given them, let's say, the yeast for growing stone and just told them how to control it with intention or some mechanical means, it could be quite easy after, for them.
So do you think that maybe this could maybe explain what we may, or some of the other videos, what we interpret as possible geopolymers? Do you think that this could possibly be what it was instead?
No, I think these are 2 completely different techniques.
Okay.
Probably, I'm not sure, because the geopolymer thing is very, very recent. It has been used even 100 or 200 years ago.
Okay, so and it's easy to distinguish, I guess, then?
No, not for us, because it's so difficult, and because not many, this requires going to the places and looking at them, and this new thing with the growing of stone, I'm not even aware of anybody doing expeditions to check exactly this stuff. So it's a really very new thing. Sadly, this video didn't get as many views as some others. If I mention some reptilian or something in some video, this is very popular, so many likes and shares. So, but the video which is like most important for me didn't get that much attention. But anyhow, so and another thing, like I really can't wait to go to the Bulgarian expedition. I'm like ready to start tonight, because I was looking also at some images of like Perpericon, one of the main sites that we are gonna visit.
Yeah.
And I'm already like, it's hard hard to explain without showing an image, but I see that the stones are cracked like natural cracks. But on the other side, I noticed that somehow these cracks they follow the runes and the staircases that they cut.
Hmm.
And
I've got your website. I've got megalith.org up right now. I'm recording it, and so I've got Paprikon up. Is there any of those pictures on your site you want to talk about while we're doing this? Because I mean, I'm showing what you're talking about right now, that the cracks being some natural, and then but also following the walls.
um, the images which I was looking at maybe 1 or 2 days ago, they were found. I found them on one 360-degree images of various places. You know, like yeah, the panorama images.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
it's a spectacular site. I can see why you're excited because it's got a little bit of everything there, doesn't it?
yeah, I'm not interested in the medieval towers. I just skip such things.
No, for sure. But I noticed it looks like the ancient tracks, like they find in Turkey and all kinds of places in the stone. That
Yeah. In Bulgaria, we also have tracks,
yeah,
and it seems that these tracks they are connected with molten stone. I saw that at least in four sites there is definitely molten stone, and officially all this is rock cut and. Yeah, I'm really very excited because this is very near to where I was born. Actually, my grandmother comes from the villages that are around this such ruins. I've never been there. I didn't even know the name of the village. I had to ask my father, and I didn't even know this site, such sites exist, although I lived there, yeah, almost 2 decades. And even now I found them by chance and not in some historic publication. I just found them on various bloggers of treasure hunters.
wow.
Historians, they don't go at such places. Come on, they have it already made.
That's right. They already got the answers, right? What do they need to look for anything?
Yeah. And then one thing led to another, and then I understood I'm looking for the wrong thing because Bulgaria is they all the time find coins. It was on the Silk Road, one of the Silk Roads. There were major Roman or Romaic roads, so people with metal detectors, it's very very popular. So this yeah, on this type of blogs for this type of people, we can find information about the historic sites because now the only relation the local people have with it is to go and rob it.
Yeah, that's horrible.
It is.
Oh my goodness! Wow. So you've got really busy 2018 ahead of you, then, don't you?
Well, let's see. Well, for yeah, after these two expeditions, let's see if I can make more in the autumn.
Yeah, that would be. The more interest you get, the better it's going to get. I'm assuming that's. Um, you've just been. How long do you say have you figured you've been really putting your soul into, determining all of this stuff, how it happened and why it's there?
Oh, it started just maybe 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, so you've been really at it hard then the last few years. I love your website is just absolute wealth of knowledge, and I usually reference it every time I make a small video on any kind of a site across the world. There's almost I know it's going to be there. So the last place I look is your website because I know it's where I'm going to get the most of my information. So it's nice that I find other things in other places that correlate what I can find also on your website, and then get a couple of different sources going, which is good. Um, so one thing that I really actually I can't stop thinking about because I think it's just fascinating, and it's honestly it's one of the things that people kind of make fun of the most, I guess, that I've discovered is that the dwarf ruins and the tiny little structures that are so architecturally, you know, like perfection. And you're kind of joking in one of your videos about how, it's like, do you seriously expect toddlers to have been able to create these types of things, and which is what the size would be. I mean, these two, 24-inch um, master
Yes.
stonemason, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, this was one thing that one line that I could not follow. I was thinking to approach. There are people who have invested lots of time researching this Erdstellen in Germany, in Swiss, in Austria, where they are found in greatest concentration. They are specialists. I was thinking I have to get like interviews from them because most of the sites are not even open to the public, or there is no way to find out where they are.
mhm.
This is one thing I still have to do, and sadly, it's now on the background of my activity.
Well, that's part of the problem with having, whatever, 600 or 700 sites that you are aware of on your site, anyways, that you can't really do them all, I guess, right?
Mhm.
But so you said right now you're really researching, was it the growing stones?
Yes, well, growing stones is just the most likely answer to what I'm really the actual question are the elf castles and these molten stone things in Bulgaria, which is they are more or less probably the same culture, same civilization, so to say. Is it really grown stone, or how did they melt it? I mean, it looked really very, very smooth, like those niches, the cut niches in Peru. Those
Hmm.
are also extremely mysterious because in other places where we have blocks, it is quite possible that they were actually cast out of geopolymer, and that would explain a lot of the perfectly smooth sides, and also it would explain lots of unbelievable drilling holes, yeah, if they were
Oh
made of
yeah.
soft stone. But when we have such cuttings on really bedrock, like in Peru, and they're really high tech, smooth, and also other traces, like really, now that is very, very serious. Sorry to have interrupted you. It doesn't mean that everything with smooth places is cast out of geopolymer. I'm just saying it's possible explanation.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because I mean, some of the surface qualities is it's astonishing, and um, yeah, it's currently obviously unexplainable, but that's really fascinating. That when you said the holes, because the that's one of the biggest mysteries, especially in Peru and Bolivia. It's more highlighted there, but it's also in Egypt and basically, all over Turkey as well. There's these in Bulgaria. I even saw some as I was just looking through their precision cylindrical holes, which we can't do today still. So that's would be a very logical explanation, having it soft.
Well, the best work on casting still belongs to Davidovich, the French, I believe, researcher. And even according to him, only part of the megaliths in Egypt, yeah, he specialized in Egypt, he thinks only part of them are cast. So it doesn't explain everything.
So
So
yeah,
some
it's
of them could have really been drilled by drill machines. It is complex, it seems.
yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with andesite or those types of bedrock stones, like you mentioned, it's as far as we understand them chemically and whatnot, is that you can't, they shouldn't be able to be cast in such a way. Um, like, how would you melt them or whatever, right? Like, you would need ridiculous, enormous amounts of heat and whatnot, unless, like you said too, if these beings had been able to communicate with one another and find a way to, as a community, to either manipulate them or to move them, then perhaps I guess that's another way of doing it. After Bulgaria this year, is there a site specifically that you have not been able to get to that you really, for personal reasons, you may want to go to and experience?
Oh, yes, this expedition to Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, which was supposed to take place last autumn. I hope it can take place next autumn because, especially the things in Israel, they're getting no publicity, and I think there's really very impressive stuff over there, which is very much on local level now. It's not known internationally,
Really?
and it deserves to be known.
Yeah, no kidding. It's such a tough region geopolitically. Um, do you have to really, I guess, do you have to hire like special bodyguards and people guides to navigate safely through these eight regions?
No, I really don't think so, at least currently. And first of all, I don't think that the sites I'm gonna be looking at have anything to do with the current population anyway.
Oh,
That's
okay.
that's one thing. Um, and then no, it's quite expensive to travel there, but I think it's relatively safe. When I researched it half a year ago, it was just fine.
Oh, that's good. That's kind of one of the perhaps one of the misconceptions that we get here is that obviously everything about that region we are told is in turmoil, and a lot of the times it's kind of a little bit nerve wracking, putting that kind of money into something that they're afraid you may not even get to see if people stop you from going into uh, certain sites. So you find, I guess, so people locally aren't even really interested in any of this stuff.
No, they are known to be like historic sites. They are not denied. Even Petra, not so long ago, the world didn't know about Petra. It got famous because of some movie, and it's still
Indiana
very
Jones,
mind
yep.
blowing. And I believe there are other mind blowing things in Israel, and I want to see them. Yes, definitely, because also we have some like Bible prediction that the full Israel will be like leveled with the ground, like
Yeah,
pulverized, how I say, made into powder.
yeah.
So I want to get there before that happens, if it happens in our timeline.
Yeah, or yeah, that that is the timeline stuff that you brought up. That really threw my mind for a loop. I didn't expect to get into that. That stuff really is fascinating because there are so many things. Before I got into anything megaliths or financial and geopolitical structure of power type stuff, I was big into paranormal research, and I got into a few abandoned places and scary stuff with, electromagnetic field detectors um, and the limited experiences that I did have kind of led me to think that maybe these types of things are interdimensional occurrences. It's just the thought about interacting with another timeline obviously is just beyond most of our comprehension, but I'm really thankful that you brought that up because again, it just shows that whether it's a financial field or history-based fields or megalithic ancient histories studies, they all seem to resonate very well together and they seem to correlate one another. I would think in other areas if we're paying attention properly, anyways. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes, 100%.
I think that's pretty cool. Well, I think that we've covered a lot of the things, everything I wanted to talk about today, and so I just want to take the time, I guess, to thank you again for spending an hour of your day with me, and I look forward to perhaps speaking with you again in the future.
It was pleasure for me, and you're most welcome anytime. Thank you.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, Sylvie, and be well. I wish you the best of luck on your upcoming expeditions, and I hope to join you sometime in the future on one of them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Take care, Sylvie. Bye bye.